Bella, stay where you are. Shows how long I haven't been here. Okay. Huh? Martina. Do you need this?
No, that's fine. Just on my phone. Alright. Hey guys. Okay, so I had a little passage that I found around 2 weeks ago. It's very loud. Sorry? Oh, okay. Okay, so it's the passage by Father Gregory the Great, so I'm just going to read like a small section of it. The treasure that was found was hidden to be preserved. In the current life, we are going forward in our behaviour as on a road that leads us to our country. On the way, there are cunning enemies that attack us as thieves. This is why he who carries a treasure openly on his way is exposed to robbery. This does not mean our relative will not see our deeds, for it is written in Matthew 5:16, "So they see your good works and glorify our Father who is in heaven." But we should not ask for any praise as to what we are doing before others. Our apparent deeds have to be done in such a way that our intention be a hidden and covered one. In this way, our deeds become an example to our close ones, whereas our intention that is pleasing to God remains unknown. I'm just going to talk for like 2 minutes about what I took from it. So what I took from it is that our treasure refers to our services. So our services in church, our services to other people, like our services just in general. And that our services are more meaningful and they include more blessings when they're done in secret. So you don't go around parading your services like, yeah, I'm a Sunday school teacher. Yeah, you don't do that. You just and you humble yourself in your services. Even if it is a public service, if it's not like a hidden service like Sunday school, the blessings are more present and more prominent when you don't expect any praise or any thanks for it. So as the passage says, like he who carries a treasure openly on his way is exposed to robbery. You can easily lose your blessings, or like the blessing of a service can easily be robbed of you if all you're doing it for is just praise or thanks, or like so people can see that you're a good servant, like you're a good servant of the church. A secret service, so an example of a secret service was, I heard it a few weeks ago in a talk. There was one guy that, he's a youth, so he serves drug addicts. So every week he goes out of his way and he goes and he serves drug addicts. He doesn't preach to them unless they want to be preached to, but he sits with them, he listens to them, or they just sit in silence because they just need someone there to sit with them. No one knows who he is or why he does this. Only a handful of people that know who he is. I find that as a beautiful example of a secret service. Your service, that service would have many blessings beyond our imagination. But that doesn't also mean that a secret service has to be something that major. That could just include giving someone a car ride home after church, or someone just praying for a service. Something even small can count as a big blessing. And again, like the passage says, our apparent deeds have to be done in such a way that our intention be a hidden and covered one. And finally, as it always says, do not let your left hand know what your right hand does. I really love that verse. But yeah, thanks.
I'm sorry, guys. It looks like I'm still asleep. Okay, now we have our lovely Bella joining us on fear as in mental health. So please, Bella. Do you need the iPad or anything?
Hi everyone. Oh my gosh, suddenly feels so short. Okay. So I'm going to talk about, obviously, a mental health issue, something that every single one of us here, every human really suffers from, fear. Now, you got to be awake with me because you have to be involved, okay? I'm not going to talk at you. So
what is it? What does it mean to have fear? Anyone? I'll give you a minute to think. It's not that hard. It's very simple. It's not a trick question. Wow, we're all asleep. Okay. So it's really simple. The definition is it's just an unpleasant emotion, and it's caused by the threat of danger, pain, harm, any of that. So I want you to have a few questions in the back of your mind as we're going through this together. In terms of fear, is it something that we need? Should we be trying to get rid of it? Can we conquer it? And is it possible to live fearlessly? And as Christians, what part does fear have to play in our lives? And how does it affect our mental health, obviously? So the answers to all these questions simply are in the Bible. However, it's not as it seems. So if you look up fear in the Bible, on the surface, it contradicts itself, if you haven't noticed. Does anyone know why? Can you tell me where you may have read about fear in the Bible? Anything off the top of your head? Anything simple? Yeah, that's a common one. Any other fear? Okay. So the Bible refers to fear in two different ways. The first one is fear of God, the obvious one. The second one is fear of evil and everything else. It's all categorized into one. I'll start with the second one because I'll probably just lead into the first, and it's easier and more simpler, I think. So fear of evil and everything else. Can you give me an example of what that is? What is fear, like in terms of examples? I can start you off something like fear of judgment, being judged. Any other examples you can think of? Common ones?
There are obviously a lot of like worldly fears, like fears of certain animals or certain ways of dying, drowning, fire, all the rest of it.
Yep. Death is a very common one. Fear of death. Fear of failure is another common one. Fear of rejection, whether we realize it's there or not, it's usually there. Is this type of fear a sin? Another question to you guys. Stay awake. Yes? No?
I don't
Not
think
sure.
so.
No?
I don't think it's sinful to fear death or fear things that like scare you or like that are unpleasant to you. Like,
It is sinful?
I
or
don't
it's
think
not?
so.
Okay.
Like, it's not. I don't think it's sinful to be like scared of public speaking. Like, be fearful of speaking in front of people.
Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Yeah, okay. So, yeah. So, fear, look, the other thing I want you to keep at the back of your mind is nothing here is very black and white, okay? And I'll get to why later. But fear, that type of fear, I disagree actually, can be a sin. Only if you look at sin defined as it's a separation from God. Because if I fear, So if I have strong faith and if I have a very close relationship with God, as an example, nothing really should bring me fear because I have something else that I'm concentrating on, not so much this. But I'm not saying that it's not true. I mean, I don't know anyone really personally that lives fearlessly 100%. That's, but that's the aim. So that's a simple way of looking at it. And the other reason why I disagree is I didn't actually know this until I was putting this together, is that the most repeated command in the Bible actually is do not be afraid. And so that was, a really, I was gobsmacked when I came across that. So it all sounds really simple, but now what? Now that, we know, we shouldn't be afraid, or, what are we going to do about it? Does anyone know what do you do from there? Like, how do you think we should be getting rid of it, or should we not get rid of it, or do you know what would the next step be? Okay. So the first thing, it's very simple, is tackling it head on and acknowledging it that's there. I know I said simple, but I don't know, now I'm thinking actually it's not. Because a lot of the times we don't realise that we have that fear. So a lot of the times it starts off by, I know it's there, but then as time goes by, it just becomes so normal and so natural that you don't even realise it's there anymore. And so your actions just automatically go, and they dictate, like that fear dictates what you're doing, because you just, you never really did anything with it, and you never really tackled it head on. And so our church actually has a lot of tools at our disposal. And we already know all of them to help us acknowledge what's there, what needs to be looked at, what needs to be done. Does anyone know what any of these are, those church tools that I'm talking about? Okay. So one of the things is quiet time. Quiet time is really, really important, because when you sit down by yourself and you self-reflect, it gives you time to self-assess and think about, why did I really do that? Or why do I keep avoiding this situation? Or, why do I keep thinking about this? And so just realizing that it's there, that's the first thing. If you don't tackle it on, if you don't realize that it's there, if you do nothing with it, it just keeps coming back, and it's going to keep dictating your actions, basically. Now, the other one is prayer, reading the Agpeya, and having some time with God, and Bible reading, and confession. A lot of these tools are given to us to help our spiritual growth, and through that, we tend to be able to see our weaknesses, see where, what we need to work on, basically. And hopefully through that process, you should come to the realization that something's holding you back. Something is dictating your actions. And so, an example could be, if I use a fear of animals, it could be like, I'm never going to this area again because there are animals there, or I'm never going to this person's house because they have a dog and I'm afraid of dogs, or whatever the reason. And so your actions are not really yours, they're being dictated by something else that doesn't really need to be there. So how do you move on from that? You realise that it's there, now what do you do? Which brings me to the next point, the first point that we mentioned, which is fear of God. Can you guys tell me, what do you think that looks like? What does it mean to have fear of God? What is fear of God? Anyone? Really? Okay. So, again, fear of God is not really black and white. I can't tell you this is exactly what it is, and anything you say differently is wrong. Fear of God manifests differently depending on where you are on your journey with God, where you are on that spiritual growth. Early on that journey, usually, fear is there, but it's more like, I know the vengeful side of God. I know the jealous side of God. I know the wrath of God. So my actions are going to be, based on fear of punishment, fear of consequences. If I do this, this is going to happen. And that's what fear of God tends to start with. And then as your relationship grows, and through all of those church tools that I mentioned before, I wish everyone was here to go through the 5. Every time I sit with him for confession, he brings out his 5 fingers, and he's like, you've got Agbeya, you've got personal prayer, you've got confession, you've got Bible reading, and I think it's liturgy. I wish he was here to correct me, but anyway. So as you go stronger in your relationship with God, and as that relationship grows, that fear of God shifts and it changes. It changes to, no longer being afraid of the wrath of God, no longer fearing, punishment, because you come to the realization of the love of God. You know him, and so now you know his mercy, you know his love, you know everything that he's done for you. And so if you think of a close relationship that you have, it could be, maybe not a sibling, maybe a parent or a role model you look up to, or a really good friend, and so you love them so much that you fear the disappointment. You might fear, I don't want to upset them. I respect them. I will do everything I can to not disappoint them, not make them upset, that sort of thing. And so that fear starts to shift and becomes what fear of God really is. And so once you get to that, everything else should shift. That second fear that we were talking about, which was fear of evil and everything else that is in the world, fear of death, fear of rejection, everything. It should all go away because you no longer have that fear and you have God to look up to. Saint Basil actually said it more eloquently. So his quote was, "When a person has the fear of God, that person will fear nothing else, even death." And the 38 sayings of St. Anthony the Great as well, they're just full of, sayings about fear. I'll read two for you. And you'll see the contradiction that I was talking before. It's very surface-based, but if you look closely, you realise that they're different. So number 32, he says, "I no longer fear God, but I love him, for love casts out fear." And then in 33, he says, "Always have the fear of God before your eyes." And so if we go back to the main theme, which is mental health, having that second type of fear, depending on how much it is affecting you, it can really be paralyzing. if you don't do something about it, if you don't sit and have that quiet time and acknowledge that it's there and take steps to let God help you, you can, you find yourself in a pit and it's just so hard to get out. And so that obviously, will affect your mental health. But that was pretty much the talk because there wasn't much interaction. So, do you have anything that you want to add or comment or question, disagree? I'm more than happy to be challenged. I'm open to sway my mind. Should have bought you all a jug of tea. Yeah. It's really, it was really difficult trying to put it all together because it's hard, if you search fear, like if you look up the word in the Bible, it came out ridiculous. It was like over 350 results just on fear. So it's obviously something really important, and it's something that we overlook very easily and we dismiss, and like I mentioned before, it just becomes a part of us that we don't even acknowledge that it's there, to the point where we lie to ourselves that it just doesn't exist, and we go about our business and we forget that it's there. And so quiet time is really, really important. Like, wherever you are on the journey of your spiritual growth, whether you're struggling or you're just not even on it at all, having quiet time is a really, really great place to start. And talking to your confession father as well, because they, like every abuna, they talk to so many people, they've seen it all. There is absolutely nothing that you can say or bring to him that's going to shock him. And so because they've, abuna's seen it all and heard it all, and he, we have historical examples in the Bible that help you, that we know, oh, this has worked and this has worked. So it's easy to have someone on your side to guide you and to keep you accountable and, just help you get out of that pit. Because if as Christians we are supposed to aim for perfection, we will never get there if we dismiss things and if we, minimize things and think that we don't need it. It's not important, it doesn't exist. Like, so what if I'm scared of a dog, or So what if I'm, afraid of this or that? It's, if you're aiming for perfection, these things matter. Every little thing matter. And we have to be Christ-like. And so, yeah, aiming for perfection means tackling it head on. Otherwise, it just keeps coming back. It's never going to go away. So, yeah. Any other, yeah.
I just have a question. I'm going to try to formulate it so that it makes sense. On your point of tackling it head on, especially when we talk about mental health, right? And having quiet time. A lot of the time, like, how do you avoid reverting back to your comfort zone? Especially when there are people out there, most of us, or whatever, that there's a real risk of when you sit with yourself, you start going into a whirlpool. Mm. So whatever your fear is, whether it's an anxiety, whether it's you have feelings of depression, whether it's when we're talking about these very serious things, because then it's all well and good to achieve this with God and everything like that, but it's such human nature to revert back to your comfort zone, because you might find that it's totally new territory, and so you're uncomfortable and you don't know what you're doing, and so you kind of revert back. How do you avoid that? And I know that we can speak to our confession fathers and everything, but at the end of the day, we don't live with them. We don't live with, you know what I mean? I don't know if my question makes sense, but it's that reverting back to what's comfortable, which sometimes is being very afraid of something, and accepting that.
So, reverting back is usually inevitable. Okay, it's just part of our spiritual growth. Not nothing, but it's hard to say 100% I'm going to succeed. We're human. We always have that struggle inside. We always have the old man and new man fighting every minute. And so as long as you keep concentrating on that first part that we're talking about, fear of God, everything should fall into place. And if you revert back, it's okay. As long as you keep going back, and as long as you keep working with your confession father, and and doing all those 5 things that Abuna always tells me in confession. I hope I haven't missed anything, Abuna. What were they? It was Agbiya, prayer, like private prayer time, Bible, huh? You don't remember. Communion and confession and service. Oh, I got them all wrong. Okay. But yeah, as long as we concentrate on those 5 things, and just keep aiming, because look, we all know you aim for failure, you aim for anything, that's where you're going to go. If you keep aiming for perfection, you'll get there. In terms of your mind going into a whirlwind, it's very common. It takes practice. You can't expect the first time you sit down to have quiet time that it's really going to be, your mind is going to be calm and on God and everything. It's not going to happen the first time. It takes practice, and don't rush it. Like, if you need to sit there for 5 minutes, great. 10, great. Half an hour, whatever it takes. That's, anything you want to add to that? That was a good question.
Exactly what you said. Unfortunately, we live in a physical world where we always are searching for physical fixes. One of the beautiful things that you study when you study science, but there's something called the placebo effect. The placebo effect in science, there are just people that need medicine to feel well when there's nothing wrong with them. So they give them sugar tablets. Oh, there's a doctor looking at me. And it works. And the amazing part is there's research that shows that works. Why? Because we become so addicted to the physical nature of things. And one of the things Bella's saying to you here, there's 5 very important aspects of our spiritual life. We don't, because we want something physical, and Abuna's giving us spiritual struggle, work to perform. we feel that that's not enough. And Abuna's not going to be with me at home. And this is not going to fix my problem. I want something that will fix my problem. Not realizing that these 5 spiritual, what I call your spiritual canon, has an invisible action that happens within you. And it's that invisible action that I'm unable to appreciate. If you actually live your spiritual life and you spend your quiet time, you contemplate in your Bible, you fill yourself with the Word of God, and you are in constant communication with God, there is work that happens within you that gives you the fear of God, but more importantly, gives you the courage to overcome any worldly fear. Does that make sense?
Any other comments or objections? Questions? I'll just add something else before we end. I know that we spoke a lot about 2 types of fears, and that fear of God, is the ultimate goal, and that to get there, we have to do these 5 things. But it's also okay that if you have a fear that is really paralyzing you, it's also okay to talk to someone with your confession father, because, mental health is it's a real thing. It exists, whether you're Christian or not. But, with the help of your confession father and God, there's nothing that you cannot overcome. So I'll just end with a verse. Not a verse, sorry. A few verses. So this is in Proverbs. So I love Proverbs when it talks about fear, because it's always, there's multiple verses where it says, the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge, the fear of God is, So it's Proverbs 2. I keep missing So Proverbs 2, verse 1 to 5. I'll read it twice for you because it's 5 verses. So, my son, in the name of the Father and Son and Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. Yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. I'll just read it again because it's really important. It's 25 verses. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. Yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Amen. Thank you.
One thing to what you're saying. Sorry, just to add one more thing to what Abuna was saying. I think something that's very important is something we very commonly see in practice is that a lot of people do believe, or they have the understanding that just because they are Christian, they can't have anxiety or they can't have all these other issues, and they have that fear of judgment that if they tell somebody that they're scared or they tell somebody that they're fearful, that they're going to be sort of like labeled as somebody who does not have faith. And I think going back to what Mark was saying is a lot of times when people are in that sort of like that state of acute distress and they have these thoughts and they can't tackle these thoughts and they don't know what to do, and when these thoughts come, they don't know how to address it. And this is a very, very common thing that, you would see everywhere you go. And I think what Mark was like, when you were saying, how do you address that sort of issue? I think just to touch up on that, there's multiple other things, like there's so many important factors that happen there. And like Abuna was saying, there's people keep on relying on the medical side of things. People are always saying, we need to have a medical approach, we need to do this, we need to give somebody a medication. And that is completely true. But when it comes to dealing with certain types of patient population, the one thing we always try to direct them in is a source of faith. People always underestimate the value of faith and the power of God in these sort of situations, and they give more sort of reliance onto medication. And that's sort of a growing problem that we have in our day and age. And I think this is something we commonly see. So I think going back to what Abuna was saying, it's very important to attribute the preventative measures, such as the 5 things that Abuna was talking about. And as much as people sort of try to neglect it, the importance of that is you want to do that as much as you possibly can before you start going down that negative spiral that you were talking about before and having these fixating thoughts. So one of those, like all those things that Abuna were talking about are, it's very important to do on a more regular basis, and that you should do that as often as you possibly can before you get to that state. People wait until they go through anxiety or a really traumatic experience for them to rely on that. And when that does happen, it becomes much harder to deal with. But when you have those 5 things in place, it makes it much easier. And from my personal experience, we always tell people whenever they're in acute distress, seek help immediately. Even at times when I'm stressed at work, I used to pick up the phone, leave a patient and go call Abuna straight away. So I think everybody goes through that sort of like state where, you become quite stressed with something, you have those ongoing thoughts. I think it's very important to actively try address it rather than neglect it.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And Mahab is stealing the thunder. Stole a bit of the thunder from next week's talk. Is it next week?